Hello, everybody. I'm Howie Hawkins. I was the Green Party and Socialist Party candidate for president in 2020. And this program, Green Socialist Notes, is about continuing to educate and advocate for the eco-socialist program that we ran on. And we have a guest today, Kieran Knutson, who is the president of Communication Workers Local 720 7250 in Minneapolis, who's going to talk about the general strike yesterday and that killing today. He just sent me a note. He's going to be 15 minutes late because what's going on with this killing by Border Patrol and ICE agents of a citizen. But I also, that's okay because I wanted to bring to your attention a couple of other crises that have developed this week that need to get more attention. One has been the attacks by the Russian missiles and drones on electric power substations that power the cooling systems of Ukraine's nuclear reactors and the spent fuel rod pools. The first attack was Tuesday night. Ukraine, in about a day, was able to restore power. But last night, Russia again attacked, in this case, a major substation in the Kyiv Oblast that powers the Rivne nuclear station, which has 4 reactors. Now, if back-off power is cut off, and that's diesel generators when the electric power isn't coming through, if that power, fails, you can have a meltdown within hours. Ukraine has 9 operating nuclear reactors, 6 in cold shutdown at Zaporizhia, which Russia's occupied, and then there are the 4 shutdown reactors at the Chernobyl site. In Ukrainian, it's Chernobyl with an O, Chernobyl. And so you got a total of, I think it's 19 reactors, and all of them were impacted by this strike on Tuesday night. Chernobyl lost all its power, although they were able to restore it the next day. This could lead to a really catastrophic situation, a catastrophic release of deadly radiation. The Chernobyl accident in 1986, there's a book put out by the New York Academy of Sciences and authored by a team of noted European scientists, including the late Dr. Alexei Yablokov, who was the environmental advisor to Mikhail Gorbachev. It's called Chernobyl, The Consequences of the Catastrophe for People and the Environment. And these scientists found, based on health data, radiological surveys, and numerous, actually 5,000 scientific reports, that as of 2004, this was published a while ago, 18 years after the accident, they found 985,000 people had already died because of that accident, most of them from cancer. 1 million from one reactor, and there are now 19 in danger. So we'll put links in the chat to some information about this. One is an article by Harvey Wasserman and Carl Grossman, and also a link to a half-hour discussion I had with them on Pacifica Radio's Solartopia California show last Wednesday. That's just a half-hour program, so it's not that long. And then we'll also put a link into a couple programs coming up. One is, again, on Pacifica Radio on Monday, and I'll be participating in this to talk about this crisis. Carl Grossman will be on, Harvey Wasserman will be on. I'm hoping to get some people from Ukraine, but it's 1 a.m. in the morning for them. We'll see if they can do it. And then also the European Network in Solidarity with Ukraine is having a program with journalists and Ukrainians about the energy crisis there. And we'll put the link to that in the chat. That's on Thursday. And, you have to understand that like a quarter of the buildings in Kyiv right now do not have power, which means they can't get water pumped into their apartments. They're not getting heat. It's a deadly, dangerous situation. I mean, people could die from this. They've set up stations for people can warm in these tents. And we'll also put in the chat links to at the European Network in Solidarity with Ukraine. I hope I got that in the links I gave to Anna. At the European Network in Solidarity with Ukraine, places you can donate money to provide generators for people in Ukraine. They're coming out of Poland and Czechia in particular. And if you click on that link, hopefully I put it in the chat. I'm not sure I gave it, but if you go to the European Network in Solidarity with Ukraine, you can find that page. So that's one thing. So that's one crisis that's developed this week. The other is in Rojava, the Kurdish region of Syria. And we have another atrocity by U.S. imperialism. In Rojava, the Kurds have led the construction of a democratic autonomous administration based on the principles of grassroots democracy, secularism or anti-sectarianism, interethnic equality, feminism, and ecology. They've done this over the last decade, and that is now being destroyed by the army of the Islamist government that took power in Damascus. The Islamists have taken 80% of Kurdish land just in the last week, and they've committed widespread massacres and other atrocities against the Kurds. I mean, I've seen online the Islamists posting images of themselves desecrating Kurdish graveyards and headstones and carrying around ears of people they killed as souvenirs. And the terrible thing is this is done with green lighting from the Trump administration. I mean, before, and particularly between 2014 and 2019, the U.S. provided air support because the Kurds were under attack by the Islamic State Caliphate that sought genocide against the Kurds. They were killing the men and boys and trying to take the women and girls to be, wives or sex slaves. And so the Kurds were able, at a cost of about 15,000 of their own troops, to push the Islamic State out of northeast Syria. And I hope to have people in the coming weeks to talk about what's going on in Rojava, this attack on democracy and human rights by U.S. imperialism, or at least the complicity in Rojava and across Syria. And so, we can see what we can do about that. So it'll be another 8 minutes if Kieran gets on right at 15 minutes after the hour. So if people have any comments or questions about Ukraine and Rojava while we're waiting for Kieran, put them in the chat and I'll, give you my response. I'm looking through it. Anna's been putting all those links in. So there's a lot of information there. Copy them and get back to them when you have a chance. I guess you all have seen the news that another person was killed by Border Patrol and ICE. It's hard to know which are which because they don't identify themselves and they're masked. They're like ISIS terrorists, masked people committing mayhem. And I've seen one video of the shooting, and the guy is on the ground. He's being pummeled by one of the officers. The others are holding him down. And then suddenly they fire 5 shots and kill the guy. And, Homeland Security is saying he brandished a weapon, but I don't see how that could happen from the video I saw. The guy was, he was under constraint. And the reporting is he is a nurse by occupation. He's a 37-year-old white male. He had a permit to carry, but we don't know, when the weapon was presented, if it was, or whether it fell out or they found out when they were manhandling him, that he had the weapon. But 5 shots and they killed the guy. So it's it's just adding fuel to this fire. And Kieran, who's been very active in this, he's going to talk about the general strike they had yesterday. And he's been involved in anti-racist organizing. He's one of the co-founders of the Anti-Racist Action Network in the late 1980s, which, through the 90s was very prominent in resisting violent racist and fascist groups in the 1990s, also defending abortion clinics. He got in a scuffle with a neo-Nazi with brass knuckles in 1993. He ended up getting charged with 2 felony assault charges and a potential 10-year prison sentence. From what I could find out, that case has not been dismissed. It's over 30 years now. There was a related case because the prosecution wanted the reporters to give their sources, including some photographs, and they won that case. So that is a kind of prominent case in Minnesota law. But in any case, Kieran has remained free and very active. His labor organizing has included fighting for more democracy in his union, the Communication Workers of America, and then getting elected as president of Local 7025 in 2021. And one of the things he's emphasized is the need to link labor and community struggles, like the struggles against police brutality. We had the George Floyd uprising in 2020, and now the ICE occupation of Minneapolis. Kieran is also involved in the Ukraine Solidarity Network and has emphasized the need for solidarity, particularly with the anarchists and anti-authoritarians in Ukraine. And Vicky Corden says no visual. I'm not sure what you're referring to. You can't see me, or you can't see Kieran. Kieran's not here yet, so if that's your concern, that answers that comment. So anyway, I won't have to reintroduce Kieran in such detail. When he gets on, we can get right into what's going on in Minneapolis and what we need to do about it. So if anybody has any questions or comments about Ukraine or Rojava while we're waiting for Kieran, put them in the chat. Yeah, I'm not seeing any. Okay, Vicky Corden says no video, she cannot see me. So Anna, is anybody else having that problem? Because I can see me, but I'm on maybe a different link. It looks like you're on the YouTube, Vicky. Yeah, Justice V says she sees me. She's on Facebook. So I don't know if it's a YouTube problem or. Okay, BD Dimmitt asking, anybody checking to see if Mrs. Rachel Good had a dash cam? That would be interesting. I haven't heard. Other people are saying they can see us on YouTube. So Vicky, maybe you should get off and try to get back on. Maybe just got a glitch in your connection. Okay, I see a question. Amy Good, 11674. Can you comment on Trump's farcical Board of Peace? I can see you fine. Yeah, it's farcical, exactly. It's a cabal of, strongmen, war criminals. They got Netanyahu. Putin said he'll come on if he can use it's a $1 billion entry fee. Lukashenko from, is that his name? The strongman of Belarus is on it. Some of these Arab authoritarian governments. It originally was to be you know, ethnically cleansing Gaza so they can build a resort, New Riviera, and set up data centers. And now they're talking about, being a vehicle for promoting peace, including between Russia and Ukraine, which is a farce. I mean, you've got the perpetrators of, genocides and Putin and Netanyahu on this board. And then Trump is the lifetime chair of the board. The Western European countries, France and the UK, and I think Germany, said, hell no, we're not going on this thing. It's undermining international law, the United Nations framework, and, they're not going to have anything to do with it. So, yeah, it's a farce. I mean, you described it in your question. B.D. Dimmitt, in Tennessee, some Democrats have formally called ICE a terrorist organization, and he provides a link. Yeah, well, terrorism is when you attack civilians for political purposes, violently attack. And that seems to be what ICE is doing. And of course, it seems like I got distracted by another question in the chat. But anyway, yeah, they're terrorizing people in Minneapolis in particular, but in other cities. Oh, I was saying Trump is I'm afraid, looking for an excuse to declare, the Insurrection Act in order to send troops to pacify or repress demonstrations and basically take away our democratic rights. So this is a very serious situation, and I'm glad to see some Democrats in Tennessee called attention to it. Chris Blankenhorn, did you see that Michael Parenti died today? No, I did not. I knew Michael Parenti when I lived in Vermont, and he was a Liberty Union candidate for governor or Senate, running parallel with Bernie Sanders with the Liberty Union Party. And I later had him come up to Dartmouth College when the Rockefeller Center for Public Policy was being inaugurated, and we set up a counter teach-in, and he was one of the people. I got somebody from the one of the Attica survivors, and other people. And Henry Kissinger was supposed to come and inaugurate the thing. When he heard about our action, he didn't come. So we had a little victory there. I have my differences with Michael, particularly evaluating the nature of the Soviet Union. In fact, we were arguing about that back in that event with the Rockefeller Center for Public Policy at Dartmouth back in the mid or late 80s. But, I'm sorry to hear he passed on. I'm not sure how old he was, probably in his 80s. But anyway, I didn't know that. Scott 164, any thoughts on the fact that the police are getting fed up with ICE? Some off-duty cops were arrested and deported. Boy, I hadn't heard that. And some, like Tim Waltz, are getting pissed. Yeah, I saw the news conference where it was clear that the chief of police in Minneapolis did not appreciate what ICE was doing. And it doesn't surprise me because ICE and Border Patrol are doing crowd control in a way that makes things worse. The police know how to do that. And for a while, at least what I heard from the radio, they were separating the ICE Border Patrol line from the protesters line. But I had not heard that off-duty cops were arrested and deported. That would just be another outrage. So yeah, it's not surprising that municipal police forces don't appreciate what ICE is doing in their communities. They're making the situation worse. Andrew Hager, Howie, as much as I love steam locomotives, I'm thinking it'd be best to temporarily remove them from service while we work on ways to combat this irreversible water bankruptcy crisis and fix it forever. Um, Howie, in relation to my statement on the water bankruptcy crisis, I propose that we, the people, adopt Japan's methods of water conservation and others for collecting drinkable water. Yeah, water is a crisis in many parts of the world. And my question for you on the matter of water bankruptcy crisis is, what do you think of these ideas I'm proposing? I don't know exactly what they do in Japan, but water conservation, recycling, water treatment, we could do a much better job of that. We are drawing down aquifers, which is creating, crises for people living in, areas of low rainfall, as well as for agriculture out on the Great Plains. It's one of these major environmental crises that is not getting the attention it should, particularly now with Trump and his minions dismantling environmental protection and, underfunding infrastructure, for water and sewage and so forth, and enforcing water pollution laws. B.D. Dimmitt, you asked about a shooting we just had in Minnesota. It was an act of domestic terrorism, Christy Nome in Brownsville, 1726. So that was Christy Nome's comment on the killing of Miss Good. And the domestic terrorism was the ICE officer that shot her, apparently 3 times. One of the last shots got her in the temple. And these people in the administration Christy Nome is someone who bragged about killing one of her dogs, shooting one of her dogs. These people are sociopaths. And, what ICE is doing, another killing, harassing people in churches and schools and daycare centers, people at work. It's got to stop. We should be the abolition of ICE and Border Patrol should be our demand, and we should have immigration agencies that assist immigrants with legal and social services to integrate into our society. As long as they're not, criminals and people that would not be welcome here. But that's not what's happening. They're just going after anybody they can say is not a citizen, including citizens. In Minneapolis, they've grabbed indigenous, particularly Oglala Sioux, that live in Minneapolis. In fact, the American Indian movement has reinstituted their police watch, which was modeled on the Black Panther police watches in Oakland, California. And they're back out on the street this time watching ICE and Border Patrol. But ICE is so out of touch with reality that they're grabbing indigenous people that were here before any of the others of us with different ethnic backgrounds. And our people got to this continent. So it's these people in the Trump administration are out of their minds. I see Scout 164 is asking, where's Kieran? He sent a note saying he'd be a little late. Oh, here he is. Hey, Kieran, thanks for coming. I already introduced you, although people are kind of coming in because somebody just asked, where are you? But I think, with the time we have, we should just get right into it.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what happened with the general strike yesterday, and what happened today with this killing?
Okay. So it's a little bit hard to describe just how what's going on here. I just say, like, it feels like the society feels like it's under attack, which is accurate. It is, but the people are generating that kind of response. And so yesterday was one of those kind of responses. Networks of labor movement and community activists built over many, many years, not always friendly with each other. Definitely sometimes contentious relationships, but came together, had been sort of toying with the idea of some kind of like general shutdown sometime soon. And then when Renee Good was killed, it felt like, okay, we need to actually do this now. And the message got put out there. A number of unions, SEIU Local 26, who organizes the janitors at all the big corporate properties and also security guards, they were the lead group. They have a high number of immigrant workers. They've had their local president told me that they've had 20 people abducted by ICE in the last several weeks. Our local was the second local to sign on to it. Our local is not heavily immigrant. We do have people that are immigrants and people who are second generation, parents are immigrants, but mainly not. And we signed on to it second. I'm a president of a communications workers local. We represent workers at AT&T, DirecTV, ADT Security, and Activision, the video game company. And so, our job was both to try and build support amongst other unions who we're friends with and contacts with. And then also, I have links to kind of what I'd call more the radical anti-authoritarian, direct action movement. And then of course, most of all, our own members. So the movement for this day of action took on a life of its own, took on momentum of its own. So for instance, on Thursday, I got calls from our stewards in the AT&T retail stores saying that their managers were threatening them that if they called out sick, that they would be investigated. And so I called the manager. We have a Minnesota sick and safe time law here that gives some people protections. And of course, it's illegal for management to intimidate you not to use that legal right. So I used that framework to call the management and get in their asses. And by the next day, they had decided to give everybody, open the vacation books and give anyone who didn't want to use vacation day unexcused. An unpaid but excused day. So just within that's my, I don't know if I said that right so people understood it, but basically my say is the corporation started to back away and basically act like, okay, let's pretend this isn't happening, or we're not going to make a big deal out of it. And that's because the momentum was everywhere. It was on the local news every night. It was in social media everywhere. Regular people outside of like activist scenes and union folks were feeling it. And I think there was widespread absenteeism or businesses closing. 700 small businesses, I think, closed across the Twin Cities in solidarity with the event. Some of them not deciding until the day before. So there, like I said, there was momentum. And then a number of the big corporations, had empty workforces that day. A number of Target stores closed because they didn't have enough employees to run it, and I think they were afraid of being targeted. They're a multinational that's based in the Twin Cities, and they've become a big. People started to talk about Target a lot. That we need to, because they've been silent about all this shit. So I might be Howie. I don't. And then today, man. And then today they fucking murdered somebody again. I woke up in the morning, checked my thing, and here comes a feed saying someone been shot. And then I get sent that video, and I don't know if people seeing it, but it's horrendous. They had him down on the ground. My wife, who is a awesome person and is a very active in the nurses union here, she told me now there's rumors that he was a nurse at the VA, the man who was murdered today.
Yeah, I saw you. Let's put the links for Kieran in the chat. One of them is from Sasha Ismail, who we've had on, actually, well, we had him on the program, I think, in December. He reprinted a statement from Kieran. They had a solidarity demonstration yesterday in Leeds in the UK. So, and Sasha's post also has pictures of the demonstration in downtown Minneapolis, and it was huge. I mean, and what was it? 10, 20 below zero there? It was amazing that so many people came out in that weather. Also, Kieran was on, you must have had to be there up at 5 a.m. to get on Democracy Now! Yesterday. So I wonder when you get in time to sleep. You got 2 minutes on Democracy Now! That's worth looking at. A long interview with him in Tempest Magazine, and then an article in Labor Notes by Steve Early about it includes what Kieran has done in the labor movement and trying to get more democracy in the communication workers. So we'll get those links in the chat. So anyway, it seems like a good response. I mean, what's your assessment? Yeah. The impact.
Sorry, go ahead, Howie.
I was just going to say, what's your assessment of the political impact of the actions yesterday, in terms of, both, the establishment, which is mostly Democratic in Minneapolis and Minnesota, and the Republicans?
I think the Democrats are still trying to, through their own channels, trying to convince Trump to pull back, but they don't have any leverage to do that. And Vance was visited here Thursday, and I think his message was they were worried about, they're losing the hearts and minds, especially in Minnesota, but also nationally. They're losing the battle over public opinion, and I think part of Vance's trip was to shore up, their base and to try and steal their forces. But they're pushing this narrative. Well, if only these people who are standing up to ICE would back down, then we wouldn't have to be so aggressive or something. But which is crazy. It's like, you're getting attacked by someone, and the person who's defending themselves is supposed to put down their hands before the person who attacked them. And then they did this murder today, which is, again, it's we don't fully know everything, but part of me feels like it was this kind of retaliation. They've given these fascists just carte blanche to do whatever. They've told them that they have immunity, and so whether it was by accident or by they're just flippant and careless, or it was on purpose and it was a strategic decision to try and tell Minnesota that that they're going to keep coming. I don't know, but it's a question about your response. I mean, I don't know how to, like, in the neighborhood that me and my wife and my brother-in-law live in, I haven't checked this week, but last I looked, there were 600 people in our anti-ICE rapid response, signal loop. And that's one neighborhood in Minneapolis. And I've heard there's 80 such loops like this. And that probably doesn't include like a lot of like Latino or Somali self-organized defense groupings or networks. So the society is really, I mean, it's kind of, it's to me, I know me and Howie really care a lot and try and follow the stuff in Ukraine. And I think, with the winter too, it really makes me feel like we have a lot to learn from this, but also there's some things that feel similar to me, in terms of this like civil resistance that's coming together. And then the withdrawal of labor, the mass absenteeism, actions by all different sectors of society. That's going on. But the question is, what will it take to defeat ICE here? And it's not clear, I gotta say, because clearly, we knew that the strike in and of itself one day we thought it would change the political dynamic. And I think it has. I think like the Target CEO, United Health CEO, all the big Minnesota CEOs are probably, doing some hard thinking about what's coming next. But it's not clear, totally what it will take. And the Democratic Party doesn't have any plan whatsoever. Walz a few days ago had did an emergency thing where he called them occupiers, but his suggestion was to film ICE. People are already filming ICE. They didn't need him to tell us that, and today, I got to tell you, the MPD and the Hennepin County sheriffs were out there protecting ICE from the community after they murdered that man. So there was a massive deployment of ICE troops, and they were acting tactically more smart and disciplined. So this was like a more trained up ICE group that spent hours shooting hundreds of rubber bullets and tear gas and flashbang grenades at the community that would come out against this murder. And then on one flank of the whole intersection, in this whole neighborhood, it's a big immigrant restaurant neighborhood that the city kind of tries to sell to tourists as Eat Street, they call it, because there's all these different, there's Vietnamese and Jamaican and Mexican restaurants and all through this area. And yeah, the local police forces, you know, and this is supposed to be these governments that are hostile to ICE and Trump. They're the ones protecting them right now. So I don't know what we need to do. I think it needs to spread. I think it needs to spread, and I think there needs to be some serious talk about a national general strike. And I know that's usually kind of a fantasy of certain left sects or something, but I think we have to start actually talking about what would it take to make that happen, and generating the momentum for it through social media and through our own social networks, because I think it's going to take something like, it can't just be Minnesota. It's got to spread.
Yeah, two things on what you just said. I think I heard you say that we can learn a lot from Ukraine and their self-organization, which when I was in Ukraine, and from what I've been reading and talking with people over there, that's what enabled them to survive. You know, when Russia attacked Kyiv, you know, their military wasn't ready, but the people,
Right.
they did everything, you know, from putting up barricades to doing Molotov cocktails to pulling out hunting rifles and joining the territorial defense. And, you know, they pushed the Russians out. And you talk to soldiers, and the organization and the local decisions of local commanders or local units is much more effective than what they get from the top. And, you know, I talked to one group of veterans in Kryvyi Rih, and they emphasized that and said, you know, if Zelensky, you know, compromises or sells us out in Ukraine, you know, we're armed. And I said, well, you mean like the Portuguese Armed Forces movement in 1974? And they said, well, no, really like Makhno, you know, the anarchist peasant leader in Ukraine during the Russian Revolution. So that is something that has really struck me, and I think people need to appreciate, you know, in terms of the Ukrainian resistance. The other thing is, I wonder, as an organizing target where we have leverage, is there's this bill to fund DHS that narrowly passed the House, still has to pass the Senate. And after the second murder in Minneapolis, is it possible to move the Senate to block that funding, which would, you know, upset, you know, the Trump administration's plans?
I told we had the president of the communications workers, the international president, a guy called Claude Cummings, who's from African American guy from Houston, who's been on the NAACP board and all that kind of stuff. And you know, he came out here, and I think it moved him seeing the situation here. But I sent a message to him today and to our international vice president for our district, and I told him, you know, they need to call every single fucking politician that we've ever given a cent to, any of these useless fucks, and tell them to shut down the government today. So I don't know. They both said that they heard me. So I don't know, but I think there's got to be the president of the teachers AFT was out here, and the president of SEIU was out here as well. The international presidents I'm talking about. So you know, before Claude spoke, I said, you know, I know you're going to say what you're going to say, and you know, we brought you out here to say what you're going to say, but I told him, from my perspective, please don't talk about November and elections, because that'll go over like a lead balloon. No, you know, nobody's got that. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about right now. You know, they're killing people now. They're tearing families apart. They're tearing children. They're using children as bait to capture their parents. They're you know, it's unleashing a fascist goon squad, a massive fascist goon squad on a community, and it's got all the things you can think of. So yeah, these cowardly politicians, you know, need to start hearing that their careers are going to be done unless they do something. And it can't just be statements. You know, we're not interested in boosting any of their careers off of some statement. Anybody can make a fucking statement. You know, I know when Bernadette Devlin in Northern Ireland, when the Brits did Bloody Sunday, you know, she went up and smacked. She was a elected parliament from Northern Ireland. She went up and smacked the defense secretary. I think it was the home secretary. Where's the Bernadettes? There's none of them. You know, not all these people are just kind of a bunch of fucking cowards. So yeah, we need to build our own networks of resistance, and I think that's happening. It's a tricky business because there's people who are new at it, and there's all kinds of ideas, and Strategies, united fronts are never easy, but we've got to start building networks of resistance that are resilient and can actually have an impact.
Yeah, I hear you on not waiting for November. I remember the George Floyd uprising, amazing what happened there for several weeks. And then the Democrats said, we'll go get involved in the election. We'll elect Democrats. And somehow that was going to stop police brutality. And
Right.
unfortunately, a lot of people took that path. And meanwhile, Biden was increasing funding for police departments from the federal government, not helping the situation. So, yeah, we need action now.
Yep, we do. And so I think there's going to be some emergency labor calls today. I think there's some sentiment for extending the strike. We'll see how that. I gotta check with our membership. It was so damn cold yesterday. We had really great, people went absent from work yesterday. The majority of our local, in lots of different silos, honored it. But the crew that came out in the cold to march was, relatively small percentage of that group. So we have to see, we kind of have to see what appetite people have. But I think people are horrified that there's been another murder. And if it's true, it comes out that he was a nurse at the VA, which I believe would be a unionized position too. Then, we'll have to raise his profile and raise his name up. Okay, an ICU nurse at the VA. Okay, that's been confirmed. Okay.
Alex Pretty.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm literally like I ran in the house, pulled off all the coats that had tear gas on it because that intersection today where the murder was is just a war zone. Just a war zone. I mean, hundreds of munitions being intense stuff. So I'm sorry, my brain's a little fried, Howie, but I'll try to answer anything else.
Yeah, no, I can understand. And, like I said, you were up at 5 a.m. to get 2 minutes on Democracy Now! Yesterday, and you probably didn't get to sleep till late last night.
That's right.
So are there any questions that Anna, who's in the background, wants? Okay, Scott 164, Kieran, with more and more people believing that being civil isn't going to save the country anymore, what is your reply to help them remain without resorting to violence or something different?
I mean, here's what I think about that. I think that we have to have the right to defend ourselves, and that will be a part of this. We're going to have to build the capability to defend ourselves in our communities, because public opinion isn't enough to stop these. We've seen that. That said, I think to me the strike is a weapon that can be used by everybody. Like, you don't have to be a tough guy. You don't have to be, skilled in martial arts or marksmanship to go on strike. And so I think that to me, this is a thing that we can all collectively try and do together, across politics, across sort of strategic and moral debates that we might have. So I think that's one avenue is the strike. But I do think we have to organize the capability to defend ourselves in our communities. And I don't necessarily call that violence, I call that defense and protection. But we're going to have to, I mean, you just think about this little boy they took, Liam, the other day, and you think about the lives they've taken, and we have to be able to stop them because there's nothing else. There's no leash on them. There's no leash on them.
Yeah, I think of self-defense as deterrence as well. Mm-hmm. So they think twice about getting violent with us. I know that was effective in the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King led nonviolent struggles, but the meetings that planned those events, they had armed protection. Mm-hmm. They had groups like the Deacons for Defense and Justice in Louisiana protecting those meetings from the Klan, disrupting them with violence. And that was enough to deter a lot of the violence from the Klan types. So, self-defense, it's different than initiating violent actions. And that's unfortunately the situation we find ourselves in with ICE and Border Patrol invading our cities. I mean, here in Syracuse, we haven't had a mass occupation, but we had ICE and Border Patrol invade a nutrition bar factory and just grab everybody. And about 2/3 of the staff on that shift, about I think 40 out of 60 people, were sent off to be deported. It turns out a lot of them had, citizenship. Others were in the process of, getting legal status, or had legal status. They're in the process of going to citizenship, or they were going for asylum. And, and then we had, speaking of nurses at the VA, we had 2 VA employees snatched by ICE, and they are I think they're Cubans. They're being exported to Ecuador. And they were here with legal status, green cards to work. It's, I'm sure people listening know similar, atrocities in their own communities.
Yeah, I mean, they're savages. They're savages. They're terrorizing. I mean, the level of terror here is exceptional, but it could be any community they pick out, and on the individuals that it happens to, it all feels the same. But I do want people to know, like, there are so many Latino families in the Twin Cities that are just locked down right now. So this is like, there's some like Anne Frank shit going on. So my wife's a nurse. One of her friends who's a nurse, her extended family, there was 3 uncles living together, and the ICE raided the house, got 2 of them. One of them hid in a fucking cardboard box to avoid getting snatched by ICE. So that's the level of where shit is at right now. And there's so many people that are delivering groceries. That's a big thing that's happening here, because families are afraid to go. For a while, people were just going to work, and then they'd lock down, not leave the house. Now people just are not leaving the house. And my buddy has a little painting company, and there's a whole crew of Salvadoran guys that are part of it, and they are citizens. They have legal status. They have legal status, and they're locked down in a trailer park where ICE sometimes waits out. The trailer park's private property, but they wait on the outside the gates, for anybody to come step off the property. So this is the kind of reality that's going on for Latino immigrants, especially, but for African immigrants, for Southeast Asian immigrants. I think people might have all seen the video or the pictures of the elderly Hmong man that was taken out in his boxer shorts from his home, in this humiliating way, only to find out he's a fucking U.S. citizen. So it's designed to humiliate, scare, beat us down. The whole thing is aimed at just trying to decimate and destroy our strength as people. And I think one of the big reasons is because of what happened here during George Floyd. A lot of stuff gets concentrated on Walls and Fry and Ilhan Omar, because that's, Trump talks shit about all that, but I think that's only a part of it. I think it's really about trying to destroy the strength and resilience of this community that has been rebellious. And I think so far people have stepped up, not enough, obviously, but they have remarkable. One of the things is figuring out how to spread it in a massive way, in a way that's similar to what's going on here, with like resilient networks based in the grassroots, in the neighborhoods, in the unions, not relying on politicians or political structures, but relying on ourselves, and with a strong sense of solidarity with each other. So I don't have a magic solution about how to make that happen, but I think everybody needs to be thinking about how to make that happen. Probably the first thing is there's going to be solidarity protests in different cities, and I think people need to start. One of the things that's been frustrating a little bit in these wide networks is that in some communities, I think especially sometimes with white and middle class people, there's been over concern about their own personal safety. Is my signal thing totally free of any, am I totally anonymous? Am I protected? Am I this, that, and the other? And we all need to be, there's serious security stuff, safety stuff we need to think about. But now as not the time to be thinking about our own personal safety. Now is the time to be thinking about, you know, for me anyways, now is the time to be thinking about sticking our necks out, taking some risks, pushing beyond what we might be comfortable with in a normal way. We want to do that strategically. We want to do that smart. But yeah, now is not the time to be, you know, fixated on our own personal safety. Um, so my sister, you know, I was hanging out with her and her friends. She's, you know, her circle is a lot of queer women, and I was like hanging out with them after a big action and stuff. And you know, they were saying we need to start instead of saying stay safe to everybody, because that's a big thing people say when they, you know, greet each other. But we need to start saying stay brave, or, you know, stay brave. So
Scott 164. Kieran, do you have any response to the 7 Democrats who voted to fund ICE? That was this week.
yeah, they're scumbags, but not just them. I mean, if they needed 8 votes, there would have been 8 votes. If they needed 20 votes, there would have been 20 votes. You know, they're fucking. What can you say? They're not. They're our enemy, and that's all there is to it. They're our enemy. They're killing us. They're literally killing us and terrorizing us. That is our enemy. We need to be extremely clear about that. These are people are not our friends.
Another question from Scott 164. A 6-part question. Kieran, this is a long as fuck question, so please be patient. I think a big issue here within the US is that we seem to be having trouble letting go and embracing change. Besides the way right wingers still push racism and stuff, they also push that Nazis were socialists, ignoring, yeah, the right wing does that, ignoring they called themselves that for propaganda and actual socialists were killed. And then billionaires became involved and they ruined the elections in 1976. Once it was elected, corporate money was allowed in elections instead of letting us examine new ideas. What exactly can we do to force change or bring it in a way so that old problems from the past do not linger on? If we don't handle these problems now, we may never get to do so. I mean, look at me. I used to be a scout trooper from Star Wars. And then I felt it was time for change and updated to the US Marine Corps combat armor from Fallout, just Scout 164. If Zoomers and millennials and maybe Gen X doesn't do anything, maybe we're in a heap of trouble, not just with shootings, but ignoring money problems and having defeatist ideas. Okay, there's a lot there. So take any part of it you want, Kieran.
I think I'll say, just in defense of the young people, I think, you know, they're one of the things that give me hope is the young folks. And I also got to say, man, I got to give it up to the retirees too, because there have been retirees coming out. You know, first the kind of the No King stuff. It was, you know, very liberal and it felt very Democratic Party-ish, but the retirees have been coming out big time for the immigrants. You know, and they're outraged by it. So I actually feel I'm heartened by the response here in Minnesota. People are doing what they should be doing. You know, just as we drove home, my buddy was driving me home so I could get on the Zoom from the scene, like I was describing, all the tear gas and all that. And you know, we drove by corner after corner where there was people had come out to hold signs. You know, like all these different intersections, and that's kind of these neighborhood rapid response groups had organized that. And my buddy was telling me that he lives in St. Paul, and he said, like, yeah, he'd seen a call put out that all the neighborhood groups were supposed to be doing that, and they were doing it. You know, they were out there making their presence known, and tons of people are honking their horns. And I mean, it's very, only thing I mean, the 2 things I've been like it would have been the Wisconsin in 2011 that I've seen. I'm talking about stuff I've been a part of personally. Wisconsin 2011 and the George Floyd stuff. It's that feeling that the whole society is rising up and trying to take it on. So I feel heartened by that. I mean, I feel scared and you know, figuring out how we're going to defeat this enemy is is a is not so clear. But I feel heartened by people's response. I don't feel down about it. And I would just encourage people to go find some people that you can work with, and even if it's a small project at first to get going, because yeah, we need people motivated and with the right orientation and attitude. You know, we cannot fall back into defeatism.
Yeah, it's a constant theme I repeat on this podcast because we do get viewers that are, discouraged and depressed. And I tell them, if you work with a group of people, it lifts your spirits. Taking action lifts your spirits. And the other thing is, a lot of times you feel like you're beating your head against a brick wall, and then suddenly the door opens and you flood through, and we do get changes. And a lot of people that were standing on the side say, we were with you all the way, but they weren't, but now they are. So, that experience, and I've done it, I won't do it now, movements I've been involved in. So I think that's really important. One comment on that 6-part question about corporate money affecting elections in the year 1976. That was when the Federal Election Commission reforms were passed, because before that, we didn't know where the money was coming from. Nixon got caught getting bags of money from corporations for the 72 election. So they basically required people to report where they're getting their money. But there have been court decisions since then, Citizens United is the most famous, that have undermined that reporting. And now we got these super PACs that do not have to report who's giving them money. So it could be coming, from Saudi Arabia as well as, Elon Musk. And we don't know where it's coming from, and it's overwhelming, particularly federal elections. So, the Greens have always pushed this We the People amendment, which would say money is property, not speech, and corporations don't have the same rights as natural human beings. If that amendment passed, it would enable us to actually regulate campaign financing, which now is not regulated. And, you have to report certain categories of contributions, but the big money is outside the realm of that. So it is a big problem for elections. Scout 164, another question. Trump proposed using Article 5 to force international troops to kick immigrants out. Is he really that dumb, or that he thinks these troops will only do that, not get pissed? I guess that's a question, I guess he's talking about U.S. military. Are they going to follow Trump's orders to occupy cities? Which, when Johnson was president and Nixon was president, sometimes when they were sent in during the so-called riots, they refused to go. So anyway, and I was part of this, the GI movement, we were resisting the Vietnam War from within the military. So anyway, what do you think are the prospects for that kind of resistance now?
Yeah, I think Howie, I think people like you that had experience with the GI movement, of course, there's a whole new generation of veterans, out of Iraq and Afghanistan, who are going to probably play a leading role. But I think the folks that did Vietnam work, people that had been doing GI resistance back at the heights, need to let's do it, man. Let's do it. Let's get the social media ready. Let's get the flyers and posters ready. Let's get the talking points ready. So when troops are on the ground, we are talking to them from day one. We are giving them our side of stuff. We are communicating with them. And I think the first message we tell them is, don't shoot the kids. Do not shoot the kids. Do not shoot the civilians. And we make that just a mantra, and that can open up other discussions as well. Because I do think that there's a history, there's a difference between soldiers and the fascist ICE and the police forces. And we need to use that to our advantage. And we need those folks on our side. Those institutions aren't on our side, but those soldiers could be on our side. Many of them are already sympathetic. But we need, like you said, Howie, there's been big movements around GIs before. There was huge resistance in the military during Vietnam. And we need to, that's my feeling. If they put troops on the ground in the Twin Cities, first of all, expand the struggle to every other fucking city in the country. Needs to be up in arms about this. And then we need to start, that they think that's their strength. Let's turn it into their weakness. Let's start let's start infecting the armed forces the same way that the unions have been infected by this movement. You know, different social scenes have been infected. You know, it's going everywhere. In my union, you know, there's a woman in my workplace. I work in a call center, and she's a pro-union worker, but she's not particularly active in the union. And you know, she told me she got thrown down on the ground by ICE the other day because she's part of her neighborhood rapid response group, and she'd gone out to confront ICE in her own neighborhood where they were abducting somebody. She's the woman, a white woman in her late 50s, early 60s, married to a black guy, and you know, considers her, you know, she's outraged by what's happening. But that's what I mean is like those kinds of stories are everywhere because it's really infected all parts of the society. And but this military thing is something but I feel like we know what the mission is. Now we just have to figure out what are the tactics to implement it. The mission is to undermine their power in the military by winning over soldiers, you know.
Well, from the context I have with active, you know, military people, including members of my extended family, people, I belong to the American Legion chapter here in my neighborhood. A lot of those people, you know, Vietnam vets who, you know, supported the war, but they are questioning what's going on. So there's a lot of doubt about what Trump is doing with the military, even within, you know, people that would normally support military action. And I think your point about basically fraternizing with the troops if they come into your city. During Vietnam, a lot of the way GIs were reached were by GI coffee houses. So when they're off duty, you know, in Seattle or San Francisco or anywhere, they go to these coffee houses and they, you know, talk to people in the anti-war movement and get information. And it really made a difference. And so I think that is really a good idea if they do show up in any of our cities.
100% agreed.
Andrew Hager's comment, new ideas are much needed this time around. I think Kieran, you know, it's not a new idea, but it's not the conventional wisdom is we got to, you know, create the pressure now, not wait for the election. You know, that's what now, 11 months from now, a lot of bad stuff can happen between now and then. So, you know, we need to put the pressure on now.
Yep, I agree. And I think also like the things that are being built now today, you know, these horizontal structures of resistance, you know, can be in many ways, like people have pointed out to, you know, there was this whole discussion in Minneapolis after George Floyd about abolishing the police and the role of the police in the society and stuff. And people have pointed out how much safer the city is with this active rapid response network with all these communities activated and alert. And there's problems, you know, there's some people who are you know, call it crying wolf too often because they're not familiar with watching the streets and seeing all the wild stuff that goes on the streets normally. You know, someone's got a shopping cart in my alley, you know, or just whatever, you know, that's the hood, that stuff happens. But the big point about it is that things are actually safer because everybody's looking out for each other. So right now, you know, it's not crime going down because they're scared of ICE. It's crime going down because people are focused on what the task is at hand and who the enemy is and are watching out for each other. And I think that's really important too, is like what we're building could be, you know, a different kind of power, one that people participate in as equals, not as subjects, you know.
Okay, Justice V just sending her love to Minnesota. Okay, Kieran, I really appreciate you coming on, you know, given all that's going on in Minneapolis. I hope it gave people a, you know, a sense from on the ground as what's going on there and, you know, what we need to do from someone who's doing it in Minnesota. People that came in late or, well, we put a lot of information in the chat. Did we get to those articles about Kieran? Yeah, we did. So, you know, if you didn't copy them now, there's a lot of material to look over, you know, do that before you get off the site. what do we call this? The live stream. And next week, I don't have a guest planned. I have a number of people invited, including Zach Belansky from the new leader of the Green Party in the UK. Some people who've been working on, journalists and activists working with the Kurds in Rojava. And, we'll see what happens this week. Oh, Sasha just sent solidarity from the UK. Sasha Ismail, who we've had on this podcast, is the trade union liaison officer for the Ukraine Solidarity campaign in Britain or England and Wales, and also active in his own union in the UK. So we'll be here next week, same time. Stay tuned to what guests we may have, or maybe we'll just focus on, current events and your questions and comments. And once again, Kieran, thanks for taking time for us.
Howard, let me just say I appreciate you, man, and I appreciate how you're unafraid to connect the struggle in Ukraine with the struggles here and around the world. And I know you talked to some Ukrainians, so please do let them know about what's happening in Minnesota. I appreciate it so much. I think if any of the Ukrainians want to make a statement, that could be really useful in many ways, including for their own struggle to keep people in their mind. But so I think there's a lot of things to learn from Maidan, as well, going back to that. So thanks for what you're doing, and thanks for the invitation. I appreciate you, brother.
Likewise, and I think the Saltsiani Root Group did make a statement. I think I saw it on their Facebook page. If I find it, I'll send it to you.
Appreciate you, man.
All right.
Okay.
So have a good day, everybody, and stay active. It makes a difference.
Be brave.
Be brave, right.